Hey, this is Megan Duffield from AmagiMetals.com here at the Libertarian Party State Convention in Colorado, standing here with Emmy Award-winning journalist Ben Swann, who's also the founder of the Truth in Media Project. So thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us.
Thank you for talking to me.
So I wanted to get started and talking about your Truth in Media Project in Season 2. Maybe you can tell the audience who might not know about it what you're working on.
Sure. Well, the Truth in Media Project we started a year ago. The idea was to cover stories that mainstream media will not talk about. And so we started that. We did a season of crowdsourcing through Kickstarter, which ultimately we moved over funds to PayPal. People did donate to it. We did 10 episodes of it, put it all together. It's on Roku, it's on benswann.com, it's on YouTube. We're actually working to get it right now on Amazon Prime and on Hulu. So it's kind of a process to get all that to happen. But working through that right now, and now we're starting our second season, so we're crowdsourcing for that as well. Folks can donate to that and contribute through Indiegogo. That's where we are. Just search Ben Swann or Truth in Media Project. And we're already starting to list some of the episodes that we're working on. But the idea is just to get into these stories that national media ignore.
Right. Yeah, I've been following your work for a while. Since the Ron Paul campaign, you didn't really leave any rocks unturned with that, which was awesome. We really appreciate that. So I wanted to dig in a little bit about what Amagi stands for and what we do as a company. And we want to promote financial responsibility. So I want to know what you think that is and what it means to you. And also, what's the biggest obstacle for people? Like, why aren't they becoming more financially responsible?
That's a really good question. Well, first of all, I think that financial responsibility in this country is not promoted either from media, from government, from big businesses, right? Everyone's constantly sending you this barrage of messages that debt is a good thing, owing people money is a good thing, buying things you can't afford now and paying for them later is a good thing, and I don't agree with any of that. So, the way I run my business, and again, we have a website which we sell advertising on. We have writers who work for me right now. I have probably in total about 20 people that in some facet are working with the Truth in Media Project. And our philosophy is very simple. We don't take out loans to do what we're doing. We have, as I mentioned, crowdsourced and we sell advertising, but we're basically a zero-based budget. We do not go into debt for anything that we're doing, and we do not float from one month to the next saying, well, next month, if there's, we can make a little more money than we can spend what we don't have now. And that's just one of the beliefs. And if we ever get to the point where we can't do that anymore, then I'll just shut it down, because I don't believe in debt. And I believe that indebting yourself to other people really is a fool's game. I know that's the way it works in America. I know that that's what credit is built on, that you go out there and borrow money, and that way people will lend you more stuff. And the more you borrow, the more they'll lend to you. But I don't like it. I'm not a fan of that on a professional level. I don't believe in it for education, acquiring student debts, and I think that we need to fight to get away from that system.
Yeah, that's a great point. So another conversation that a lot of people talk about is ending the Fed and how they're kind of they're the kings of debt, right?
That's right.
They're the ones that have provided all of this money, this free money to the economy. So a lot of people say end the Fed, free money, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people say end the Fed, but a lot of us at Amagi kind of think that competition is actually what should be entered into the marketplace, not legislation to end this bank.
Well, I think legislation in order to prevent the Fed from having a monopoly would obviously have to happen, because right now that's what we have. But I think we're starting to see that on different levels, especially on the state level. You're starting to see multiple states that are beginning to pass laws to say, well, we're going to allow gold and silver, for instance, to be recognized as legal tender. Well, those are big steps. Creating competing currencies is a big step. But I agree with you. I don't think that we need to call for an end to the Fed. I think we need to introduce competition, and that will end the Fed. Right. Because the reality is what the Fed is doing is destroying the U.S. dollar. They've been destroying it for many, many years, but I think we've seen an acceleration of that over the last few years. And thanks to Congressman Ron Paul more than anyone else, right, who has drawn so much attention to this issue. So many people had no idea what the Federal Reserve Bank even was, right, and how it operated. And so I think one thing he was able to do was introduce people to this idea that it's a Ponzi scheme, it's a scam. The same thing, if you ever watch the CNBC show American Greed, mm-hmm, the same thing that all those folks go to prison for is the same thing our government is doing every single day. Yeah. And he exposed that.
Right. So, and on the topic of competing currencies, Bitcoin is really changing the game right now, and all the other cryptocurrencies that have been popping up to go along with it. So, Amagi Metals, we actually accept Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Dogecoin for gold and silver. Okay. So essentially, that means they are backed by gold, which the dollar can't even say that.
Yeah, right.
So have you integrated that into your life? Is it something that you're, supporting and waving the flag for at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin. In fact, we received a bunch of contributions to our Truth in Media project the first time around and this time around via Bitcoin. And so you can go to the website, benswann.com, and you'll see on the right-hand side a place to donate. And we have, where you can donate via Bitcoin. But look, I think Bitcoin and other competing currencies as well, cryptocurrencies, I think Bitcoin is not the be-all, end-all, but it is definitely a game changer. And I think, people will complain about it and say, well, it's dangerous, and you get these companies like Mt. Gox that come along and then they take people's money, and so it's too risky. Listen, first of all, I believe Bitcoin is capitalism. It's real free market capitalism. The actual thing.
Yeah.
And which is very confusing to people because if you think about it, that's really the only place we have actual free market capitalism in the world today, where there's no government involvement right now. And as long as we keep government out of it, does that mean that it's all sunshine and lollipops? No. There's risk. There are bad players who get involved, and that's okay. What we've done is we've assumed this idea that if you accept that there's no risk by letting government in, everyone's going to be safe. Well, government doesn't prevent risk. Government just decides who they're going to bail out of risk, right? They decide who is important enough to not have to mitigate their own risk. So I think with Bitcoin, what we have to do is look at it and say, we want to keep government out, we accept the fact that there's risk, and we remind people that Bitcoin is entirely voluntary. No one's forcing you into this process. If we don't force people into it, and bad players like Mt. Gox collapse, yay. It's good that they collapsed because they were bad players. And by the way, 3 months before they collapsed, I wrote an article telling people, stay away from Mt. Gox. Okay? It was called Bitcoin is Soaring, Beware Mt. Gox.
That's what he's talking about.
Well, listen, it was because I worked with them and I saw that they were not responsive to me as a customer. They took money they weren't supposed to take. They wouldn't return money. And so I saw them as a bad player. I took a loss. I lost money because I interacted with them. And tried to use my experience to tell other people, stay away. After they collapsed, I reposted that article that was 3 months old and told people, remember this. And I had about a dozen people who contacted me and said, thank you, by the way, because after reading your article, I did get out of it, right? And it saved me thousands of dollars. The point of saying that is when government says that it's unregulated, that's not true. It's regulated by the consumer. And I think the consumer always does a better job of regulating themselves. Listen, if you have Bitcoin, I guarantee you check on your Bitcoin far more often than you check on your Federal Reserve notes that are sitting in a bank someplace, right? Yeah.
And I always like to compare the Mt. Gox situation to people who are learning the bank bailouts back in 2007. If Bitcoin was regulated, Mt. Gox would still be standing and with a faulty business structure. So to go along with that, too, the Fed recently, Janet Yellen, the new Fed chairman, suggested to everyone that the Fed was going to steer clear of Bitcoin. Do you think that's something that's going to change in the future, or?
Well, she wants to steer clear of Bitcoin. Senator Joe Manchin wants to outright ban Bitcoin. I think as long as they steer clear of it, that's great for Bitcoin, right? When she says things like that, and I think that would actually make Bitcoin go up, right? Because who's going to have confidence in the Federal Reserve? The power players, the power structure, the politicians will tell you how the Federal Reserve is the be-all, end-all when it comes to finance. But those of us in the market say the Federal Reserve is a joke. We all know it's a joke. So, yeah, please, Janet, stay away from Bitcoin as far as you can.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So, and moving on to precious metals, which, we deal a lot with cryptocurrencies. We're huge proponents of cryptocurrencies. However, gold and silver, historically, it's been around as a way to hedge against inflation. So I'm sure a lot of our listeners would like to know if you would consider yourself a silver or gold bug.
Well, I wouldn't say a bug. I'm actually learning much more about it and starting to, find out more. So I think that obviously, gold a few years ago, I wanted to get into it as a young guy, and I was like, this is the way to go, and I never did, and now I'm like, stupid. Yeah, that's not very smart. And it was
Everyone
really
feels that way about Bitcoin, though, too.
Well, they do. That's true. And I was in early on Bitcoin, so I didn't make that mistake. But I mean, I felt like, I don't know enough about it, and I want to learn more about it. But I think the thing about gold and silver is monitor what other governments are doing around the world. Stop listening to American media and what the U.S. government's doing, You got to watch what China's doing. You got to watch what Russia's doing. Watch what these other powers are doing who are stockpiling gold and buying it up and allowing, even in China, for their population to individually buy silver and gold and encouraging them to do so. When the Chinese are doing things like that, it's a pretty good sign, I think, for folks here.
All right. Well, thank you for the insight. I love talking about cryptocurrencies with you. I'm excited to see season 2. I'm sure you're going to be covering them a lot more, I imagine,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, I would imagine so. Well, in our first season, we talked a little bit about Bitcoin, but we want to do much bigger issues on this and talk about, again, the capitalism issue here, right? The importance of people accepting this free market philosophy, because media is lying to us over and over when they convince us that you got to stay away from these things because they're dangerous and reckless. And my favorite, by the way, before we go, my favorite quote from Senator Manchin about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is that it's used for illicit behavior, as if dollars are not used.
Right. And there's actually a congressman here in Colorado that wrote a satirical letter. Jared Polis was his name. He wrote a satirical letter about how the dollar should be banned because of all the illicit activities that went along with it.
Maybe it shouldn't have been satirical.
Yeah. But all right, well, thank you so much. And you want people to check out benswann.com?
Yeah, you go to benswann.com. Swann has 2 N's. You can check me out there. And you can find the Truth in Media Project again on Indiegogo. Or you can find it. We have a link at benswann.com.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming to Colorado.
Thank you.
Take care.